Ceaușescule, ieși un pic din groapă să vezi ce-am ajuns. Ceaușescule, ieși un pic din groapă să vezi ce-am ajuns. Ceaușescule, ieși un pic din groapă să vezi ce-am ajuns.
Nicolae Ceausescu, the genius of the Carpathians, a true national communist icon, and one of the most infamous dictators of the 20th century. A stubborn, stern, and stupid man that built a nationwide cult of personality akin to the Kims, partied and paraded like an animal, built whatever he wanted wherever he wanted, and exhausted a country of 20 million people physically and mentally until its predicted collapse. How catastrophic is this tragic comedy exactly? And is there even the tiniest silver lining to this cancerous cloud? Well, in this video we'll discuss just that. So make yourself comfy, get some Gusto corn puffs with a surprise toy, and prepare to learn about arguably the most insane European dictator of all time. Nicolae Ceausescu's story and path to Romanian domination is a true rags to riches success story. Like any young adult from southern Romania, he moved from his home village of Scorincești to the cosmopolitan city of Bucharest, looking to earn some money. He worked as an apprentice shoemaker and was a part of the emerging communist youth movement of the 1930s. Throughout the tumultuous interwar period and 1940s, he dedicated his life to the socialist cause, and after the end of World War II, quickly rose up the ranks of the new communist government led by Gheorghe Dej. Now, Gheorghe was not the sharpest tool in the shed, but nevertheless he was still quite ruthless and calculated. One second he was kissing Stalin's boots like your typical leftist male college sophomore in the search to feel a woman's touch, telling Yugoslavia to f off, and imprisoning political opponents. The next, he was opening up trade with Western countries, adopting national communism in spite of Soviet influence, and imprisoning political opponents. Pretty typical communist dictator stuff. Watching the political chaos unfold, Ceausescu understood that he needed to stay on Gheorghe's good side and follow his leadership. And what would you know, his careful political maneuvering paid off when news broke out of the leader's sudden death, which definitely had nothing to do with the uranium block he had been using as a paperweight. True story, by the way. Immediately after, a brief power struggle ensued, after which the former shoemaker emerged as the leader of the Romanian Socialist Republic. Coming into power, Nicolae Ceausescu picked up right where the previous leader left off, continuing the plans of economic and industrial development under the guise of national communism. He promised to be a great reformer and to turn Romania into one of the world's greatest powers. One of his first policies he implemented in an effort to achieve this was also the most controversial one, the 770 demographic decree. In order to maximize the number of children from each household, abortion was outlawed except for special cases, birth control was banned, monthly gynecological checks were mandatory, divorces were pretty much illegal, and childless couples had to pay an additional monthly tax. This policy was at first a resounding success, as this generation of future workers was by far the largest in Romania's history, as women essentially shot babies out as if their privates were a 20-gauge shotgun. And the generation that spawned as a result of this policy was coined as Dictator, aka decreers. However, more and more women resorted to illegal abortions and contraceptive methods, which were extremely dangerous and often performed in terrible conditions. Many of these abortions were conducted in unsanitary makeshift clinics or even private homes, often by unqualified individuals using rudimentary tools like knitting needles, chemicals meant for industrial use, or even their bare hands and nails. Women would undergo these harrowing procedures in secrecy, terrified of being reported to the authorities or facing severe punishment if caught. Seeking professional help was seen as the last resort, and images of traumatized patients carrying buckets of blood still linger in the doctors' minds, who couldn't do anything before the supervising militia had their final say. Officially, over 9,000 women died under Ceausescu's regime due to complications arising from illegal abortions, with this number being potentially even higher due to undeclared deaths. The other victims of this decree were the thousands of children that were abandoned due to their families being unwilling or unable to support them. Over 100,000 children were left on the streets and in the sewers, or arguably worse, in poorly maintained and underfunded ghetto orphanages, where they were subject to physical and mental abuse. use and lacking any amenities such as water, food, medication, or even heating. And all these aforementioned precarious conditions made them vulnerable to underground networks of human trafficking. And although it might seem that the days of Decree 770 are long gone, the trauma of this heinous decree is still felt today amongst many Romanian families. But it was a sacrifice Nicolae Ceausescu was willing to make in order to secure the necessary labor and manpower needed for Romania's grand industrial transformation. During this time, Ceausescu also started pursuing and pushing one of his core ideals for Romania's future: total energetic self-reliance and independence. To achieve this goal, he hired professional experts in the energy sector and invested lots of cash in order to harness as much power as possible across the country through diverse power plants such as Romania's biggest thermal power plant, Termocentrala Turceni, the Lotru-Ciunget underground hydropower plant, and the Cernavodă nuclear power plant, and the Iron Gates hydroelectric dam, in collaboration with Yugoslavia. These new energy producers were necessary in powering up the newly constructed industrial complexes and factories. To ensure Romania's economic self-sufficiency, Ceausescu diversified the industrial output of the country, expanding on a plethora of sectors such as agriculture, manufacturing, textiles, automobiles, chemical products, and even military technology. Perhaps his vision of industrial excellence were a bit ludicrous, given that his oil refineries exceeded actual petroleum extraction capabilities by a factor of 4. And the quality of these products are subject to debate, as they were made mostly for self-reliance, not for profit. But surely this couldn't become a problem in the distant future. Nevertheless, Ceausescu was adamant about industrializing the country, but as Romania was still enlarged an agricultural economy, drastic changes needed to be made. One of such was the forced relocation of the rural population to developing industrial cities, offering them affordable housing in the form of compact commie blocks that were easy to build and maneuver. These residential micro-districts, or mikros, were also equipped with medical facilities, green spaces, schools, and markets to create decent living conditions for the Romanian workers and persuade them to exchange their rural homes for a new urban lifestyle. However, within this policy there were also heavy racial undertones. You see, although Romania is majority, Romanian, the country is not without its minorities. The most significant of them are the Hungarians, who primarily inhabit Transylvania. A large chunk of the Hungarian population at the time inhabited metropolitan cities such as Cluj, Brașov, Oradea, all the while making up the majority of the population. In an effort to make these cities more Romanian, they were forcibly moved out whilst Romanians were moved in. And if you think that's bad, the Germans and the Jews might have something to say, but more on that later. Even so, these plans for rapid industrialization and development boosted the Romanian economy and opened up the country to promising and lucrative economic deals with other nations. But, as lucrative and good deals as they were, they all failed in comparison with the deals offered by Nordvpn, baby! Now, you all know how Ceausescu's story ends. Him being shot in a ditch by his own people. Could have Nord protected him from bullets? Probably not. But if he were to have used them while browsing the internet on sketchy streaming sites in an effort to watch Shrek 2, then hell yeah! Unlike other VPNs that just change where you're browsing from, Nord goes the extra mile and protects you from malware, phishing, scams, and other threats that cybercriminal scum might throw at you by blocking fake and malicious websites and pop-ups. In addition to that, Nord also stops dumb web trackers and protects your privacy. Best part of all, it doesn't even need a VPN connection to work. That's how good Nord is. While browsing, Nord also monitors the web for your data and alerts you immediately if it detects a leak. So, with Nord, you can easily browse the web at your favorite cafe with a sense of security and procrastinate like a pro, watching region-locked Netflix shows and movies. So, don't waste any time and go to my link in the description at nordvpn.com/ironicallyvpn and get your exclusive NordVPN deal, plus 4 months extra with a 30-day money-back guarantee. Now, Nicolae Ceausescu, much like Dej, was not the sharpest tool in the shed. but he was very sociable and a good people pleaser. Following the doctrine of national communism meant standing up for his country's interests and resisting foreign influence. As such, Ceausescu was seen as a bit of a rebel within the Warsaw Pact. He had a complete fallout with newly elected Soviet leaders Leonid Brezhnev and the other re-emerging issues of the Sino-Soviet split, as the Romanian leaders sought peace and love amongst all socialist nations. And following his condemnation of the invasion of Czechoslovakia, mogging the USSR, the world braced itself for Romania to suffer a similar fate. However, relations between Romania and the Soviet Union were eventually repaired and the invasion never came. Ceausescu had an impressive ability of making the most optimal external decisions that would expand his horizons and present new opportunities, and seeing his defiance against Soviet imperialism and the resurgence of the Romanian economy under his regime, Western countries, real recognizing real, rooted for his success, entered negotiations and lucrative deal with the Romanian Socialist Republic. For instance, under the Ceausescu regime, Dacia, the largest car manufacturer in Romania, was able to strike a deal with the French automobile company Renault and produce cars under their license, such as the Renault 12 and 20 models, turning into the iconic Dacia 1300 and 2000, respectively. The Romanian economy benefited greatly from Ceausescu's establishment of foreign relations with the US and their Western allies, communist comrades of the Eastern Bloc, fledgling African nations, and most notably Asian socialist republics, which would have an immense influence over the Romanian leader. However, none of those relations were as significant as what was about to come. In 1971, Nicolae Ceausescu embarked on an Asian tour of socialist republics to strengthen relations with other communist nations, including China, North Korea, Vietnam, and Mongolia. Talks with leaders like Mao Zedong and Ton Duc Tang were productive. However, the most fruitful and impactful visit was the anticipated trip to Kim Il-sung's North Korea, which fundamentally changed Ceausescu and his outlook on the world. Nicolae was captivated by the elaborate dances and choreography, impressed by grand celebrations and rallies, and pleased by the lavish feasts and banquets. You might find these demonstrations appalling and dystopian, but I know deep down you would also love seeing an entire nation sing tribute songs in your honor. I mean, just admit it. As such, he was completely enamored by the way a single leader could shape an entire nation in his own image, and became determined to transform Romania into his own version of a national communist paradise he saw in North Korea. Now, there's a slight misconception that Nicolae Ceausescu turned into an egomaniac thirsting for absolute power only after returning from his North Korean visit. Truth be told, his desire to obtain full executive control was there from the very beginning. That North Korean trip simply confirmed his biases and motivated him to go full insane dictator mode. During a 1971 speech titled the July Thesis, or to use its full name, proposed measures for the improvement of political ideological activity, of the Marxist-Leninist education of party members, of all working people, Ceausescu let everybody know the country's new shift in priorities, with the leader gaining even more executive power and ushering in a new Romanian cultural revolution under his image. Persecution of political opponents intensified, and any hopes for liberalization or the adoption of Western media and products vanished instantly, so as not to interfere with the grand cultural reconstruction of the country. Over time, just like in his utopian muse, North Korea, Ceausescu fostered one of the weirdest cults of personality in Europe, becoming one with the Cultural Revolution by fusing national communism with his own rampant egomania. A far cry from the humble leader of the late 60s, who flat out refused to be publicly displayed or praised. In 1974, he became the first president of the Romanian Socialist Republic. This allowed the Romanian people to democratically choose their ruler, and they collectively showed their gratitude by electing him with 99.9% of the votes and awarding him with a sick royal scepter. For nearly 2 decades, the communist propaganda machine, consisting of political activists, journalists, artists, and writers, worked relentlessly to construct and uphold Nicolae Ceausescu's image as the genius of Carpathians, a nickname he awarded himself, and the protector of all Romanians. This effort involved into a carefully crafted narrative of his life, highlighting symbolic events like his birth in 1918, the year of the Great Union and the Treaty of Trianon. Coincidence? I think not. Alongside this narrative were pompous parades and meticulous celebrations, creating what would be considered an entire industry of honor. The leader's birthday became a national holiday, giving everyone a chance to bask in his glory and offering the admiring public an opportunity to display their undying devotion. Authors and editors honored Ceausescu with grandiose titles including Great Helmsman, Visionary, Prince Charming of Fat Frumos, the people's most beloved son, Demiurge, secular god, and celestial body. But what's national communism without an artificially pumped national identity fueled by historical revisionism? Apart from positioning himself as the sole pioneer and initiator of communism in Romania, the Ceausescu cult elevated minor local lords and kings to legendary national heroes, greatly exaggerating their feats as symbols of Romanian unity against the treacherous Ottomans, backstabbing Europeans, and spineless boyars representing the bourgeoisie, just like yours truly. Under this strong nationalistic pretense, Ceausescu oversaw the selling, that is the forced deportation of Saxons and Swabians from Transylvania back to Germany, with the Jewish population facing similar fate by being sent to the shadow realm known as Israel in exchange for some mullah. So, by all accounts, the Hungarians and Székely dodged quite the bullet and are lucky to remain in Transylvania. Under him, Romanian history also highlighted the Dacian tribes, portraying them as technologically and culturally equal to the Romans, which may have fueled the modern Dacomania movement and its wild conspiracy theories about alien technology and primordial energy. Nicolae wasn't the only person to benefit from this grand makeover, as it was also applied to the Romanian First Lady, Elena Ceausescu. Being the loving and caring trad wife that she was, Elena always wanted a direct seat next to her husband, and if Nicolae was the number one person in the country, it was only natural that she would be his number two. Despite being nearly illiterate, she obtained a PhD in chemistry, though entirely behind closed doors. She skipped high school and enrolled at the Faculty of Industrial Chemistry, didn't attend any classes, passed all her exams, and also became a researcher at the National Institute for Research and Development in Chemistry and Petrochemistry, and her illustrious career was carefully aided and supervised by the Minister of Petrol and Chemistry, Mihail Florescu. Romanian authorities ensured that her thesis was carefully crafted and researched by other chemists, and she made sure to receive praise and honors from scientific institutes in every country she visited, reinforcing her image as a world-renowned scientist and chemist. Externally, she displayed extreme snobbery and avarice, projecting her inferiority complex onto other leaders as wives and bargaining aggressively for the lowest prices on high-quality souvenirs and luxuries. Internally, she was a control freak, constantly at Nicolae's side, never letting her children out of her grasp, hiring secret services to monitor their private lives, and meticulously arranging their marriages. Despite sharing her husband's influence, cult of personality, and power, Elena Ceausescu left no lasting legacy. She's now universally hated and ridiculed, even by the staunchest Ceausescu simps, who blame her solely for the downfall of socialism in Romania and for corrupting the pure-hearted comrades. Women. Am I right? Either way, though Ceausescu's rampant egomania was fueled by nearly everyone they encountered, everyday workers, party colleagues, and especially influential Western leaders like the British royal family and US presidents Richard Nixon and Jimmy Carter. On Nicolae Ceausescu's diplomatic visit to the West, much to the chagrin of the Romanian diaspora and the exiled King Michael I, everyone made sure to glaze him beyond reason and admire his aura, hoping to appease the Romanian dictator and strengthen diplomatic and economic ties with the Eastern European country. Take for instance their UK visit in 1978. What was supposed to be a formal negotiation for aviation technologies turned into an embarrassing power trip, fueled by the Ceausescu's desire to receive a true royal treatment, from riding golden carriages to staying for 3 nights at the illustrious Buckingham Palace. Much to the dismay and disgust of the British royal family, especially Queen Elizabeth II, who actually started hiding and running away from them. The reluctant endorsement of foreign powers and the countless praises and honorary titles, no matter how disingenuous, certainly got inside Nicolae Ceausescu's head, and his authoritarian ambitions grew even larger. From his perspective, his status as national hero and mastermind had brought happiness to all Romanians, and anyone who expressed any discontent surely had to be crazy and in dire need of correction. From psychiatric torture to brutal physical labor, Ceausescu made sure to make use of even the most ungrateful and undesirable, because what are human rights anyway? Are there risks of death? Even better, they must give their life to our national cause, figuratively and very literally. One such passion/punishment project was the newly revived plan to force political prisoners to dig a canal from the Black Sea to the Danube River, which already flows into the Black Sea. To be fair, the project involved a significant economic boost to Romania's largest port city, Constanța, benefited the Danube Delta environmentally, and was part of an ambitious mega-project to connect Bucharest to the mighty Danube dating back to the former Gheorghiu Dej administration. And the Romanian power couple had even grander visions for Bucharest. If it wasn't for those pesky Art Nouveau buildings and heritage sites, they could have transformed a modest little Paris into the brutalist utopia of their dreams. Perfect! The 1977 earthquake was a traumatic event that shook Romania to its core. Entire cities were destroyed and thousands of people died or were injured, especially in Bucharest. Where others saw tragedy, Ceausescu saw an opportunity to rebuild the capital city in his own image. However, to fulfill the dictator's wet dream of 8-lane boulevards guarded by massive brutalist buildings, entire streets and old neighborhoods were bulldozed to make way for the new monolithic blocks of marble and concrete, demolitions which would be known as Ceausescu. Bucharest was now Ceausescu's sandbox, and his worst architectural crime was the story of the former Uranus neighborhood, the current site of the Ceausescu's crown jewel, the People's Palace. One of the world's largest and heaviest buildings, spanning over 365,000 square meters and weighing roughly 4 billion kilograms of high-quality Romanian marble, crystal, and steel. It stands as a monument to the dictators' greed, egomania, and ruthlessness. Oh, and did I mention that he gave the architects and engineers a reasonable term of 2 goddamn years to finish building the heaviest building on Earth? What could have possibly gone wrong? It perfectly lines up with one of his famous quotes. The worst part is that I insist and you give up easily. To make room for this abomination, an entire neighborhood with homes and historic sites was leveled. Across other areas, additional demolition projects led to the destruction of about 10,000 homes and the forced relocation of over 50,000 people. But it was a sacrifice Ceausescu was willing to make. However, not all of his plans were vanity projects. Some of them were actually useful and well planned, like the Ciurel Dam and the Lacul Mori Reservoir, which were constructed to protect the city from flooding. Yes, I know that an entire village was abandoned and demolished for it, but you know, yet another sacrifice he was willing to make. Another massive project from the Ceausescu era was the much needed Bucharest metro system. The sole reason why traffic in this godforsaken city isn't completely paralyzed and why it only ranks at a measly 4th place among Europe's most congested cities. Unfortunately, the Romanian power couple just couldn't resist taking control of this project either, adjusting routes and proposing stations as they saw fit. The most egregious instance of this unnecessary meddling was the Piazza Romana, Roman Square, one of Bucharest's busiest metro stations and site with several universities, which was at risk of being scrapped altogether. Elena Ceausescu, in a classic display of her stinginess, wanted to cancel the construction of the metro station, stating that students were getting too fat and should walk instead of taking the metro. The architects, realizing that a station absolutely needed to be built in that area, had to build it in secret, resulting in the extremely narrow and dangerous platforms of the station. Over time, due to Ceausescu's isolationist and megalomaniac projects such as that big concrete tumor, Romania regressed from a promising potential Western ally to the North Korea of Europe. A great way to impress his North Korean BFF, but not so much to ensure economic stability. Couple that with the dictator's obsession with rapid industrialization and inability to grasp basic economic concepts such as realistic project deadlines and supply and demand, and you get yourself a heavy debt of around $10 billion. So surely, all this reckless spending was toned down, right? No. To combat the debt acquired through his ingenious policies, Ceausescu decided it was time to reorganize Romania's economy with the sole purpose of paying off its debts. To achieve this, anything of value would be sold off for foreign hard currency, which more often than not, due to poor quality of the products, was sold for pennies on the dollar, which would be funneled back into the industrial sector. Naturally, the subpar quality of these products, which were only intended to be sold internally, was quickly revealed when exposed to the competitive global market, and said quality plummeted even lower because of Romania's scramble to sell anything and everything to pay the debt. Domestically, driving limitations were imposed and heating, oil, medicine, and even food were severely rationed, causing the prices of daily necessities and malnourishment to skyrocket. Within just a few years, the already low living standard of living fell by 40%. Apart from cutting the weekly television hours from 14 hours a day to 3 hours a day, other forms of entertainment such as parades and demonstrations praising the glorious leaders were left intact, because happiness clearly makes up for an empty stomach. These inhumane living conditions, combined with a more ruthless and better funded Securitate, aka the secret police, that kidnapped or beat down any ungrateful scum for daring to criticize the Carpathian overlord, drove more and more people to flee the country. Many resorted to swimming across the Danube into Yugoslavia, desperate to escape the impoverished hellhole that was once their home. Eventually, Nicolae Ceausescu managed to pay a huge part of his debt, which many in the Cățeni loved to bring up in his defense, and completely ignore the self-imposed starvation, mass displacement, human rights abuses, and complete and utter megalomania. Because hey, at least he paid off the debt he raised to realize badly thought out projects that no one really asked for. You know, good guy Ceausescu in the end. But either way, it was too little too late. In his attempt to keep the industrial development going and to continue living his lavish lifestyle like usual, he completely disregarded the well-being of his people, which cost him dearly. The suffering and civil unrest reached a fever pitch in 1989, when, like in all other Eastern Bloc nations, the people of Romania took to the streets. In a final display of incompetence and stubbornness, the Romanian Bonnie and Clyde attempted to quell the impending revolution by brute force, as the only way they would give up their power was over their dead bodies. And as fate would have it, over their dead bodies it was. Following a chaotic revolution and years of economic uncertainty and mismanagement, Romania has developed massively since the dire living conditions of the 80s and 90s. Still, Ceausescu's legacy is alive and well thanks to nostalgic boomers longing for the good old times, lunatic nationalists shouting aggressively about Romanian sovereignty, as well as gullible young tankies angry at how Romanians have squandered the gifts of communism and completely ignored the blessings of Julius Small, baby! Oh, I fucking love them all! Doamne, îl iubesc pe Julius Small, mia și testiculul stâng pentru Julius. Julius este dragostea, Julius este viața. Julius, sponsораți-mă, vă rog! Julius! As always, if you enjoyed this video, click that like and subscribe button, and if you really enjoyed it, become a member like these wonderful people. Or go and buy some of my merch at theeroticshop.com. My name is Janusz, and you've watched Living Ironically in Europe.
Hey, why are you